So right now I'm in the middle of trying to lock down a big job as the lead DP on a multi-part doc series that I'm really excited about, but the problem is they're not 100% sure they trust me with their show because we've never worked together. On top of that, the show is going to be shooting on ARRI cameras only, which aren't my normal tool of choice, so I do get why they're a little nervous. But I really want this job, and so I went way overboard and rented $150,000 worth of cinema cameras and lenses just to prove a point and make sure the job is mine. And now the challenge is going to be to build out a test interview frame good enough for Netflix or HBO based on some very specific reference photos they sent, and I need to make it all happen before this restaurant I borrowed kicks us out. So this should be a super fun video with some serious gear at our disposal, and at the end we'll compare my setup with the reference frames and see if my version is good enough to land me the job. Because if it's not, they'll probably still see this video and that could be game over. So before we really dive into this, we're just waiting for my friend Sean to show up with the rest of the gear, but I should probably give you a bit more context on what we're doing here. I talk a lot on the channel about the importance of doing spec work and the need to actually prove that you're the right person for a job by making stuff. So I wanted to put my money where my mouth is. I really want this job and I do think I'd be a good fit for it. So I'm gonna step up and show these people that I can actually do it. When I first started talking with this production company, one of their main priorities was getting really high quality, super stylized interview frames because they had a very specific vision in mind for their show, and it was going to be really interview heavy. They weren't just interested in me showing up and doing my thing. They want me to hit a mood and a consistent style throughout the whole 20+ days of shooting. They also want to shoot all of this project on ARRI cameras, and they especially don't like the Sony cameras, which is what I own and normally shoot with. So in the event that I actually get the job, I also wanted to get some more hands-on time with an ARRI just to make sure there weren't any surprises on shoot day. Luckily, a friend let me borrow this really cool restaurant for the day because it's closed, so I can use it as a location. So we packed up the 2010 Subaru to the gills with lighting gear, and in a few minutes, Sean's gonna show up with the rest of like $150,000 worth of lenses and gear that we rented for the day. And then I'm gonna try and use everything at my disposal to match the look and most importantly, the mood of the reference frames they sent me. Now, obviously, I'm gonna put my own spin on things. I'm not making an exact clone, but the idea is that the vibe and tone need to be in line with what they like. And if they don't like it, then at least I know where to make adjustments moving forward. And I'm actually pretty sure I can see Sean coming across the street now, so I'll just let him in and then we can get all the rest of the stuff set up. Okay, so like I said, we're using an ARRI camera for this. I rented the Alexa 35, which is more or less their newest camera, I believe right now. This is about a $90,000 US camera. Definitely a lot more expensive than the FX3 we're shooting on now, and about 9 times the price of the FX9 that I normally use. Personally, I've always maintained, or I've always said to other people that if you just have the right colorist and lens, then probably any modern camera can be made to look like any other. But I honestly don't know if that's true. I've said it about 50 times, but I also might be wrong. This might look so much better than anything I've ever seen before or shot with before. So I'm actually genuinely interested to see. And then next week in the video, we're gonna put this head to head with an FX3, FX9, a Burano, and this to see if it actually makes a difference. Like, can normal people tell and can a professional cinematographer tell? So we've got the Alexa 35 set up. This is the stock monitor from ARRI. Right away, you can feel how much better this is than the stuff that ships with FX9s, for example. This is like an incredible monitor, an eyepiece in its own right. I'm pretty sure it's heated even. We're also running a Small HD Ultra 5, just because I kind of prefer the way Small HD handles false colors, which are going to be pretty important for this setup. First impressions taking it out of the box is that you can tell that this is a $90,000 camera. It is super well made. Everything is really solid. Even the way the handle goes on, it just screams German engineering. We're also using Cooke S4 mini lenses, which are really beautiful Super 35 cinema lenses. I think the production wants to use ARRI primes, but these are fantastic and they're what we were able to rent. So I think it's gonna be good. Other than the amazing build quality, my first impressions of this rig are that it is really heavy. I think if you were hand operating this or shoulder operating this all day, it would get really tiring. Not necessarily the end of the world, and I think for a lot of people who would be considering a camera like this, they probably have an AC. They're gonna shoot one take and then hand it off. The kind of work I do, run and gun doc stuff, where you're carrying the camera yourself and sometimes shooting 45-minute takes of a scene, this would probably be a little tough. An easy rig would help take some of the strain off, but just something to keep in mind. For this though, which is really focused just on an interview frame, the weight doesn't matter because it's gonna be on a tripod all day and plugged into wall power, so none of that stuff matters. Hopefully this all goes really smoothly. This isn't my first time shooting with an ARRI, but it is my first time with the Alexa 35, so there's probably gonna be some growing pains as I figure out how all the systems work. But before we actually get into lighting this interview, I need to do some important analysis. So I'm just gonna jump over here to where my laptop's set up and do some planning before we start moving lights around. All right, so the very first step here is to figure out what exactly we're trying to create, because there's not much point in doing a huge setup like this if we don't make it look like what the producers have in mind. Like if I come back with a bunch of setups that look nothing like the reference images, it really doesn't matter how cool they look. I probably won't get the job. So to start, I'm going to pull up a couple of reference frames they gave me on my computer here, and then I'm gonna try and break down what's going on here. And apologies in advance, because a few of these are really low res. Like I'm pretty sure this one on the left is just from the little Google Images preview. In fact, I can see the little bit of logo still left. That's what they sent me though. But even so, it's enough to see what characteristics they have in common and where I can start trying to make my frames look the same. But first, I should introduce you to Sean, who really hooked us up and helped us find a great deal on all this camera gear. Sean is, some of you might recognize him. Sean has a gigantic YouTube channel. He's got like over 5 million subscribers. So he's doing YouTube way better than I am here. So we're lucky to have him. But Sean, well, I guess first off, you're pretty into filmmaking. You're not a full-time filmmaker, but... No,
I was originally interested in it, and that's the path I thought I was going to go on, but then my YouTube channel started working out, so I switched gears to making YouTube videos they have nothing to do with filmmaking, but my interest and I guess passion for it is still there when I'm not playing Minecraft.
Yeah, so go check out his channel, Forge Labs, right? Yeah, Forge Labs, 5.5 million subscribers. Really great storytelling going on there. Like even if you're not into Minecraft, like the flow of the whole thing is really, really well done. I can see why it's so popular. But as someone who's really into cameras and a passionate amateur, what do you see going on here?
Like thematically, it looks dark. First thing I noticed, it looks like it's almost like maybe crime related is my guess. And like, you know, one on the right here has got a lot of red coming in, so it looks very, very moody and very intense, I guess, and dark. I'm assuming the subject matter is probably dark as well. They look soft, but that might be from the resolution. But also, I mean, you can kind of determine like the way the focus is kind of rolling off. It looks very appealing, I guess, and very not like crisp, but in a good way, right? Like it looks easy on the eyes. You got like the subject on the left here, he's lit up brightly. You've got, again, if I want to try to break down, looks like a nice key light, my guess is over here, coming in, hitting his head, but the lighting on him is very soft as well. I keep saying that. And the background is dark. You've got, you know, the bokeh there, like some of the red light there going on, bouncing off the bar. Same thing on the one on the right. You've got a red light coming on the back of his head. I believe that's called a hair light. I could be wrong about that, maybe. So
no, that's exactly. Okay. Or backlight.
Yeah. You got redness coming in there, but I see red on the right side of the frame. So clearly something over here is throwing that. Maybe it's that light there.
Yeah, I think it's probably separate lights, but yeah, they're trying to trick your brain into thinking that's what's happening. Something's
going on, yeah. Cool. I guess that's as close as I can get to breaking it down.
No, that's great. I mean, I think you touched on a couple of really important things for this, that there is this darkness, right? These are not bright frames by any means. And you said they look like they're crime related, which I totally agree. And I think part of that is because the key light is coming from this sort of very high downward angle. It's like it's coming from the top of their head looking down, which is giving it almost like an interrogation style vibe. I think that was done intentionally. And that's something we're definitely going to try and replicate. And the other thing you said that I really want to focus on is that, yeah, there is a lot of color going on in these frames. Like, these both look like, to me, like they're both shot in a restaurant or bar. I think most of this colorful light was probably added to give it a sort of noir, film noir, little bit of a danger vibe. Right? I think it looks like they're using this out of focus light in the background to motivate all of this red lighting. Right? Your brain subconsciously thinks that this and this are coming from here, so it makes sense. But actually, I'm guessing there's one light lighting this and a second light lighting this, and this, they're not related to this at all. And possibly another light bouncing down here in the frame. So we're gonna try and work in some color to give it a bit more character. We're gonna try and replicate this high sort of interrogation style key light. The other thing I noticed is there's quite a bit of depth. There's a lot, you know, they're not right up against the wall. There's a lot of depth in the background, so a lot of separation between them in the background. Also, they're all shot pretty, you know, we'll say standard. It's sort of you know, there's nothing too crazy going on, no outside the box angles. They're sort of, you know, belly button and up with not too much headroom. In fact, this one's sort of cutting off the headroom. So quite tight. I'm guessing somewhere around 50 mil focal length, and a lot of depth of field in the background, in the sense that I think they're using a pretty low f-stop. So there's a bunch of commonalities going on here that we're going to try and replicate in our frame. We're going to use Sean, very kindly has volunteered to be a bit of a model today. But before we can actually start putting up lights, we need to find a frame that works. So we're just going to spend the next, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes looking through the camera and moving around to all of our different positions and seeing what angle we like, and then we'll work on lights. So yeah, you're down to sit in for a while? Cool, let's do it. So basically what I'm doing is just moving around the restaurant for a little bit and just hand holding the camera, which is no easy feat with this. I'm noticing with the Alexa 35 right away, this is a significant amount of weight. I don't think I could actually hand operate like this for a full day of dog shooting, but luckily we're on a tripod for most of this shoot. But right now, I just want to go around the space, and based on all those common factors that we had from the last reference frames, I'm just going to try and find what is our best option loosely, and then we're going to dial that in more precisely in a second. But I just want to know more or less which direction in this restaurant are we shooting. And it's kind of determined for us already. Both of the reference frames had a lot of depth and were very dark, so we don't want to shoot towards this big front window, which we're going to black out with garbage bags anyways. So it's really going to be a matter of deciding, do we want to shoot this way with the restaurant as our background, or are we going to try and shoot this way and use the bar and kitchen as more of our background? So I'll just fiddle around hand holding this for a little bit until I find something I like, then get it on sticks, and then we can actually start getting lights in. All right, so I think I've found a pretty good starting point. There is a ton of work to be done still in order to get this frame dialed in. We're gonna make a ton of micro adjustments, and we're gonna be changing the light completely. But I think this as a basic angle works. There's depth in the background, we have the ability to control the light, and I think after about 4 or 5 hours of tweaking this setup, it's gonna start to look pretty good. So the very first thing I'm gonna do is, obviously this looks kind of terrible right now, the lighting's awful, but I'm looking for just a couple of key commonalities here. I'm trying to sort of split the difference between these two frames. So I'm trying to give, you know, sort of belly buttoning up like this. We can always punch in to get the tighter version later. So I'm using this as sort of my guide, and I'm trying to look for opportunities to get a lot of depth in the background, and also for ways that I'm gonna start playing with the lights. Like I've noticed this guy is sitting up against a bar with some red splashes and some bounces off here that look really good, and I think there's an opportunity to kind of do something similar here. I'm also noticing I'm gonna have to block out this light in the background because these are very distinctly dark frames, so that sunlight there is kind of an issue, so we'll have to deal with that. In general, this is gonna change a lot, but this is a good starting point. And I think from here, the next thing we have to do is get full control of the light in the room, and then we can bring in our key light. So the very first step is to take control of all the light. These are really dark frames, so I can't have any random daylight coming in. This is far enough in the background that I think I can just use this big piece of cloth and block out the window this way, and I think it's going to be so out of focus that you're not actually going to be able to tell what it is. It'll just look like miscellaneous black. We've already blacked out the giant front windows, so I think once we get this up, we'll have more or less complete control over all the lighting in here. One of the problems I didn't anticipate is that because this is a restaurant, everything is super greasy. I know there's some professional grip and rigging specialists out there who might be watching this and just freaking out about how terrible this tape job is. I don't think anyone's gonna notice. All right, run back to the camera quickly and see if this blends into the background like I hope it will. Yeah, so as I look through the viewfinder now, I mean, it's kind of weird looking because it's just this big black square, but I do think that once we turn off all the kitchen lights and use our own lights instead, that's just gonna really disappear into the background. And as you can see, we used a whole bunch of industrial garbage bags to block out this massive front window, so there shouldn't be any light leak in this way. So more or less, we have complete control over this room now. We went through and turned off all the lights. Probably I'm gonna turn a lot of them back on again, but I just wanted to see what this looks like with 0 overhead lights, and then we can selectively add some back in. But before I do any of that, I just wanna try and set the key light first and see if we can get the right angle and vibe from the reference photo. So I'll get the 300D out of the box, and I honestly think I'm just gonna use the standard softbox attachment for this, but let's get it out and see.
Have you enjoyed doing YouTube so far?
I've really enjoyed it. I've liked it because it gives me some level of consistency, like between jobs, to have something to work on. In general, it's been pretty life-changing, honestly. Like, cause it's like, actually this job, this is like a 6-part HBO mini doc. This job, they found me on YouTube.
Really?
Yeah, cool. Not through my website or anything, because I asked them, the woman's based in Australia. Yeah. This is a big budget show, and it's kind of unusual to just hear from a stranger totally out of the blue. And I was like, how did you find me? And she's like, oh, YouTube. I was like, all right, now that's cool. That's interesting.
So this, I have a question actually. This is, it's not called a grid, is it? Or is it called a grid?
Yeah, a grid or an egg crate.
And that focuses the light, right? So it stops it from spilling everywhere. It's to keep it more focused on like what you're trying to put it on. Yeah,
exactly. Like if we didn't have this, this would light up like the entire space, but this should point it in one direction. Okay. And if you look at the reference frames, it's only them that are lit.
Yeah, he was like, that's one of the things I noticed. Yeah, just him is he's bright, everything else is dark.
And honestly, I think that's gonna be a challenge here, because I think what's gonna happen is when we turn this on, we're gonna get a ton of light spill here, and I think we're gonna have a lot more light, and I think we're gonna have to pull out a lot of tricks to see. But let's try it once. We're gonna put it up and point it down, see how it works, and then start fiddling from there. And then probably do this for the rest of the day. One of the nice things about using an all aperture setup is that I can run all of these lights through this Sidus-Link app. So as I set up each new light, I'm just gonna add it here, and then I should be able to control it from behind the camera, which is super handy to stop you running back and forth like crazy. Connected. Cool, that's on the network now. Right off the bat, a couple things I'm trying to do. Obviously this looks a lot more contrasty. I think we're getting close. I think the key light needs to be a little bit more frontal. But the first thing I'm kind of checking are the contrast ratios. So I'm trying to see, is the ratio of bright to dark on his face roughly the same as their face? So one way I can do that is by using false color, which I think small HD does better than almost anybody else. A tip is, skin tones to be correctly exposed should be at about 70, the number 70 on this scale. I'm not going to go into a whole thing about how to use false color or read IRE values. There's a million YouTube videos out there already that are going to do that a lot better than me. But if you say that 70 is a good starting point for skin, and then I look at what the shadows fall off to, you can see that all this magenta stuff, this is all absolute zero. So this is complete black. And if I look at the reference frame, that's not what's happening at all. There's quite a bit of fall off. It's probably 2-to-1, 3-to-1, maybe even a 4-to-1 ratio here. But this is way, way, way too extreme. So that means we're going to have to compensate by adding a lot of extra light into the background and filling in the side of his face a little bit more to get that look. As a general starting point, that's not so bad. So we're gonna leave it there, and then I'm gonna work on bringing up the levels in a bunch of other places in the room. All right. So I'm standing back here at the monitor, and Sean is filming me from the interview chair, and then in the far back we have Hank, who's gonna start turning the house lights on and off. This is all very meta, but I think it's the best we can do. Cool, Hank, turn on all the chandeliers. Okay. Is that full brightness? There's this little, okay. And turn on that little light bulb. It's got a separate switch on the cord. Yeah, that's gonna stay for sure. And so that's all the overhead lights on full brightness? Okay, and Sean, look here for a sec. All right, that's already warming everything up a lot and reducing a lot of those. Okay, let's leave everything there for now. Yeah, including the one you just turned on. I think that, turn it off? Turn it back on? No, I think that helps. I think we needed some fill in this frame, so I think that helps. Let's leave them all there for now. After turning on all the overhead lights and experimenting with different intensities, I think we're starting to find something that's getting closer to the sort of mood and vibe in these reference frames. But if you look at the difference between what I have now and what they have, one, we've got a lot of random crap in the way. We're gonna have to do a lot of set deck, move a bunch of stuff out of the way and just sort of clean up the background. And two, they've got a lot of really interesting lighting going on. And none of that, I don't think, is accidental. Like how you have this one half moon of orange light in the background motivating all of these splashes of red. We want to try and do something similar, and luckily we have an exit sign in the background that's going to help us out with that. So we've only used one light, and I've still got 4 2-foot Infinibars, one of their B17 light bulbs, and a 600C Pro 2 that I'm going to try a whole bunch of different combinations and see if I can't make the background look a little more interesting.
One thing I do notice is the blurriness of that is quite bit more intense than what we've got going on here. So I don't know if maybe you'd want to switch to one of the other.
Well, this is our longest Cook lens.
Yes.
The 65, right?
Yeah, you would have to switch off of Cook to.
For a more depth of field, right?
Yeah, but I don't know if that's important or not to this. I think this is already looking pretty good though, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think you're bang on. I think that the lens they're using is definitely lower t-stop than this one.
Yeah.
Because this is what, a
2.8.
This is a 2.8. So not a ton, but I still think we use this lens over the other cheaper ones.
Yeah, for sure.
You were sitting in the interview seat, so you didn't really get to see, but with just one light and some overheads, is this what you thought it was gonna?
No, I thought there was going to be more needed to get it to this point, to be honest. But
it's pretty close.
Yeah.
I feel like if you just did this and a little bit of messing around in the kitchen, you could have a halfway okay frame.
For sure, absolutely.
Yeah, that kitchen's like a black hole. So I think that's where the red should come in. Both of these frames have red elements, so just to be very specific and to honor what they did, I'm gonna try and keep red as our accent color. So I think maybe the first thing I'll try is the 600C Pro 2 because it's a new light for me and I'm not used to having big RGB, high powered lights. Might be overkill, but I'm gonna get that thing set up on a stand and see if that works and see if I can pop a bit of red into that kitchen using a big spotlight. Oh, I'm not even gonna lift that. Lift that up. Try and keep it really narrow.
Okay.
All right, this is a huge boy. So I've got the 600C Pro 2 set up. This is way overkill for this. I'm guessing I'm gonna have to use it at like 10% or less. But something in each of these frames that I notice is this theme of red, right? They like a bit of color. And whether or not the show we work on together uses red in the same way, we're gonna try and match this as close as we can. So I wanna get more color into the background. Nice thing about having a fully RGB big light like this is I can bring it way back out of scene, and I'm just gonna use the Sidus Link app to pick red as the color and then hopefully shoot a bunch of red into the background that just sets off some nice pops of color and makes the scene a little bit more interesting. I'm a little worried that we're gonna get a lot of red backlight on him that's gonna look almost fake, so we might have to come in with some flags or cinefoil or something later and try and cut that down. But for now, let's just see how it interacts with the background. So I'll switch to Sidus Link. Pick red, full red, and that's it at about 10%. So we'll go back to the camera and see how that looks and then make a couple tweaks. And you sit there and look at here. One thing I like to do with all lights that I'm introducing is turn them on and off a couple of times, make sure they're actually doing what you think they are, and then play around with the intensity by going way over the top. I mean, that's like satanic levels of red in there. And then dial it back until it looks kind of not completely fake. All right, let's do something like that. That's 11%. Yeah, and as I kind of suspected, around his shoulder, there's this really strong red rim light that I don't love, and we're gonna have to try and block out somehow. But I do like the little pops in the wine bottles off to the side. I really like the bottom left corner, the accent on the bar rail. And really strangely, it does seem mentally like your brain accepts the fact that this tiny little speck of red off in the dark might possibly be motivating all of this light. Like it all kind of fits, at least for me. Let me know if you think I'm crazy in the comments, but we're gonna leave it there for now and move on to the next thing. So the kitchen's looking a little bit dark, and I think the next thing I wanna do is try some of these Infinibars. I've got 4 of these. I'm gonna try 2 of them and put them super warm, maybe 3200, and then just walk around in the kitchen and see. I don't actually wanna see that this is an industrial kitchen back here, but right now on the frame, it's looking like a black vacuous hole. So I want just a little bit of detail, something in there. So we're gonna play around with these, and I think they should hopefully do the job. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna use a second Infinibar because the kitchen's really deep and I kind of want to pull the viewer's eye through the frame, which means having a little bit of detail all the way back. So got 2 of the 2-foot bars. I've got them both on 3200. And luckily in kitchens, everything's magnetic, and these things have some of the strongest magnets I've ever experienced. Like, it's almost scary sometimes. You want to not get your fingers between this and the metal. But very handy for situations like this. Hopefully, with any luck, this is metal. Oh yeah, it is. Those things are insane. Yeah, so we'll go back and look through the viewfinder and see if that's looking good and maybe what we need to adjust. Okay, back at the camera again, and yeah, those lights are looking pretty good. If I turn them on and off, it's really subtle, but it's adding some detail back there. And when you look at the reference images, there is lots of stuff happening in their backgrounds. They're not dead at all. So I'm really liking what those lights are doing. I'm just gonna turn them off for a little bit to save some battery. The next thing I wanna do is, I notice in both of these frames, there's quite a bit of reflections, and especially in the left frame, there's a lot of nice bounce off of the bar behind the guy. And since we have a bar behind, let's try and do the same thing. So I'm gonna get one more of the tube lights on a C-stand and see if I can boom it out over the bar and get just a little more interesting lighting happening on that nice surface. This is my favorite bag of toys. I don't know why this gives me so much satisfaction, but just all these, like, do you geek out over this stuff?
Not this stuff quite yet. I mean, maybe at some point once I start getting into it. But
next level dork.
Yeah.
So as good as Sidus Link is, one problem I've noticed it has is that if you keep closing the laptop, a bunch of the lights get confused and disconnect from the network. So you definitely do not want to be worried about power with this thing. Like, you don't want to be using it a little bit and then closing it and opening it again. You'll just ruin your whole network. So bringing a extra V mount with a USB, or even better, like a super high capacity battery like this Anker Prime, is incredibly helpful if you don't want to be constantly running around resetting the Bluetooth. So everything's starting to look pretty good. We're gonna have to make a lot more minor tweaks, obviously, but before I go any further and get any more lights out, I think it's time to do a set decking round. And by that, I mean just going all around our background and just getting rid of all the stuff that's cluttering up the frame, because there's a few things in there that I can see that I don't like, that until I get rid of them, I'm just not gonna be able to go much further with the lighting. Let's get in there and start pulling out all the milk cartons and unscrewing the taps of the beer, and yeah, a ton of little tweaks, and then it's gonna look much, much better, I think. If you don't mind staying behind it, and actually you can probably call out things if you see things that you don't like. It's just a whole thing of cream just chilling on the counter. These things were really bothering me. These big white bars in the frame, these have to go. You got a photo of the order of these, right? That would be, imagine how much of a disaster that would be for the restaurant if we just mixed up all their... This is very official, union approved technique. I think I was wrong. I think that light would be better. I think it's too dark there. I think if I'm gonna reorient that light bar and point it back that way, it's gonna look, I think that's the move. All right. We should get rid of those plates, at least the white ones. That's better. A couple more things we're gonna do that I can see right off the bat. To be really nitpicky, I'm gonna replace the light bulb over his right shoulder with my own light bulb, one of the Aperture B17s, and just see what happens if I mess around with the color or the intensity a little bit. But yeah, we're getting there. We're getting close. Gonna need a few more lights still and a couple more tweaks, but closer than we were before. If anyone's been paying attention, this is the 4th hour in a row, though I'd say we could have done this quite a bit faster if we hadn't also been making a YouTube video about it at the same time. So yeah, maybe this would take 2.5 hours to get to this point already. So save yourself a lot of time to set these interviews up. So this might end up being the better light because it's so powerful. Okay, we're starting to get to a good spot and we are out of stands. And I also realized we forgot the MC Pro Kit, which I was gonna use to put all sorts of little splashes of color around the frame. That's on me, there's nothing I can do about it. So try not to make any excuses there. There's a couple things I really wanna fix before we call it a day. The first is all the red rim light around him. I think it's just a little bit too much, so I want to bring in maybe a scrim or a piece of neg fill to cut it down a little bit. I like a touch, but I don't want a glowing red silhouette over his shoulder. Then I also want to try and cut down the red just a touch by maybe putting a piece of cinefoil over that big backlight. Hopefully that takes some of the heat off of the bar. And then for a third thing, I'm noticing his eyes are kind of flat. One of the trade-offs of doing this sort of top-down interrogation type light is that you get sort of shadows under people's eyes. And we want something there, like an eye light. So I'm probably gonna bring in my last Infinibar and put it on a stand just in front of him till I can see that eye light reflected. And maybe it's also gonna give just a touch of fill as well to just improve the total look of the key. So I'll try all 3 of those things and then we'll come back and look at the frame, see what we've got, make any last minute adjustments, and then hopefully call it a day. Oh, rookie move. Always got to keep that on the right. Devastating, Hank. You're fired. So the idea here is this Matthews Road Rags net is hopefully just catching a bit of that red and softening up, putting a bit more of a subdued look over the back of his shoulder so it's not quite so electric neon. This is just a piece of cinefoil. If you don't know what that is, it's basically industrial dark black aluminum foil that you can sort of shape around things. So I'm just gonna put a little bit on the bottom part of this reflector. Just crunch it into a shape, and I think that's gonna knock down the light on the bar just a touch. And then this is the last of the Infinibars that we'll use as an eye light and a little bit of a sort of frontal fill. All right, so we've used every light I have because I forgot the case MC Pros like an idiot, but quick recap, we've got one Aperture Infinibar in the kitchen, a second Infinibar under here, both set to 3200. And then coming outside, we've got the big 600 C Pro 2 set to a red color and with the reflector on, just sort of throwing red light here. We've got the B17, B7, I forget what it's called, the Aperture light bulb, also set to 3200 here, replacing the bulb that it came with. And then we have another Infinibar here, adding a bit of bounce off of the bar and filling in this wall back here. And then coming forward, we have this net, this scrim in front, cutting the backlight and making it a little less intensely orange. Then we have our key light, which is the 300D. We pulled the egg crate off, found it wasn't really needed. And it's just on the Light Dome Light Dome 2. And lastly, we have our fill light / eye light, which is the 4th Infinibar, and this one's set to 56 so that it fills in the key a little bit and adds an eye light. So yeah, we're gonna call it there. It's been quite a long day and everything gets way longer making a YouTube video about it. So before we wrap it up and get it on the computer to see how I did, I'll just go through and turn every light on and off so you can see what each one is doing. Okay, so this is the completely empty frame with no lights at all and all the windows blocked up. Not much to go on here except that red dot for an exit sign. So now we'll turn on the house lights. So those are the house lights. They're all on dimmers, so it's pretty subtle, but I think it brings out a little bit of detail in the room and helps us out quite a bit. And now we'll add in our own lights. So first, the key light. Then we'll add in the 600C Pro 2 in the back, which is our red. Then we move on to the kitchen lights. Again, nothing crazy happening there, just a little pop of detail so it's not completely black. Then we add the light over top of the bar, which gives a little fill to the background and a little splash of texture on the bar behind him. And then we have the last light bar, which is filling in his face and giving us a bit of an eye light. I'm gonna bring that down just a touch. There we go. And lastly, the light bulb in the back. And then just as an experiment, this is what it looks like without the splash of red. It's sort of to taste. The image had red in it, so I added it. It's not necessarily what I'd normally do, but it works one way or the other, and it's pretty easy to take in and out. So one of the advantages of having big RGB lights. So I'll leave that up to them whether or not they like it with or without the color. But yeah, that was, I think, about 7 hours, again, magnified by the need to shoot a YouTube video about it. I'm gonna get this into Resolve and I'm gonna tweak the colors a little bit and play with it. For mood and style, obviously it doesn't look exactly like the other locations, but to me it gives off the same vibe, which is a sort of dark, mysterious, borderline criminal, moody vibe. With quite a bit of depth, and I think could work really well, but I'll have to send it to them and they'll be the judge. And then what do you guys think? Did I do a good job here, or is this a hot mess? I don't know. You let me know in the comments. All right, so we're back here in my office and now it's finally time to take a look at the frame and break down the final image, plus figure out how successful I was in hitting the mood of those reference frames. So on my computer, I've got the Alexa card ingested and semi-graded with the RE Rec 709 conversion LUT, plus a few other tweaks in Resolve for contrast and tint mostly, because the footage was pretty green straight out of the camera. And then a couple of other small minor random adjustments, like a touch of noise reduction. Now, I'm not really a very good colorist. I've just basically tried to get it to look like what I saw on the monitor. I'm sure a pro would do things differently, but that's all good for this test. So I'll open it up here on the laptop real quick and we can take a look together. So here's the shot. And from my perspective, I'll just be straight up with you. I'm only maybe 70% happy with this result. I do think it was a great experiment, and overall it's a good looking interview setup that I'd feel pretty confident about sending to a client normally, but it didn't go perfectly by any means, and the point was to match the references, not just make something that looked good in general. So let's start breaking it down, and I'm mostly going to focus on the negative stuff here because fixing what went wrong is really the whole point of doing a test like this. The biggest issue is that I don't think I really nailed this key light effect. When you pay close attention, the reference frame is a lot sharper and has more definition than mine, which I think is a bit too soft and diffuse. For starters, I used a 38-inch softbox from about 4 feet away on this one, which looked decent in the monitor, but now that I see it, I think it was the wrong call. Like, you can really see the key light as a source in the reference frame, like these little highlights here, which helps give them a harder, more defined look. Mine is extremely soft, which does look good on skin, but the point wasn't to make him look good. After thinking about it, I think what this DP probably did was put something like a 2x2 panel or maybe a bank of tube lights very close to their head and then just out of frame, and then brought the intensity way down to stop the whole thing from blowing out. That explains why you'd see the source highlight so clearly on their foreheads, where in mine the light is too far away and too soft and it just sort of melts around his head. For a lot of shoots, I think this would be a pretty solid look actually, but that wasn't the assignment here. Luckily, I have quite a bit of time before the first actual shoot day, so in a few weeks I'll run a couple more tests with different key lights, specifically key lights, because I want to make some adjustments and see if I can get closer to this original look. We also probably didn't help ourselves by shooting on Cooke lenses, which are famous for their dreamy look instead of being super sharp. But even so, I don't really think it would have made enough of a difference to be the cause of the issue. We also shot the Alexa with the nostalgic grain profile, and even though these baked-in grain profiles look really nice, they're not really something I'm used to, and probably I should have used something clearer, like something more modern. But again, I don't think that's the make or break deal here. The key light is just not quite right, and no lens change or film emulation is really going to make that much of a difference. I also think that the last infinibar I set for an eye light is filling in a little too much of his face and killing a bit of the contrast, which is also kind of holding the mood back a bit. I do think the overall effect is stronger because of having an eye light, and without it his eyes wouldn't have popped quite as much. But if I go back and forth between the shot with the tube in it and then the one without it, I like it better without, if it weren't for the eye light. Now this is totally my fault for leaving the case of MC Pro lights behind, and while I don't really want to make excuses and blame the tools or lack thereof, not having those on hand did really bone us in a couple of ways. Firstly, as an eye light, a small MC with a grid would have been a way better choice and probably avoided a lot of this wraparound fill that washes out the contrast more than I want. It's not the hugest deal, and if it came down to a choice between the eye light and no eye light, I'd probably still use the tube, but it wasn't really the right tool here. The other thing I'm not totally satisfied with is also related to the MCs, and that's the background, in the sense that both of the references have a lot more hard light going on, especially if you look into the backgrounds. If I look at the tighter shot here, obviously it has these hard accents on the side of his face, and also on the booth, and then obviously the other one has tons of these orbs in the background that are motivating all the hard bounces off the bar top. Now I wanted to do something similar myself, which is what the MCs were originally meant for, but again, I'm an idiot and forgot them, so it really kind of hurt me here. With the grids on, they would have been perfect for making these little hard patches, plus I could have dropped some of them like deep in the background where they would have turned into more bokeh balls like the exit sign did in my frame, but I left them at home, and that's a good lesson on its own, because if I actually did that on shoot day, it would have been a pretty big problem. Like, you can't tell a producer I would have done a better job if only I'd brought the right gear. They just aren't gonna care. It's your fault. I tried to make up for it by using some of the 2-foot tubes over the bar, but it's not quite the same because tubes are really soft just kind of by nature, and you can't get the same sort of hard, sourcey look with them no matter what you do. Now, a good craftsman isn't supposed to blame their tools, but then again, a good craftsman also isn't supposed to forget the tools at home, so whether or not I could have done better doesn't really matter to me, because in this case, I didn't do better. And the wider frame, I'm not really sure what's going on in the background. Like, is there a big window with city lights coming in, or maybe it's a shelf full of bottles or glasses? I don't really know what's making all these orbs, but it's something I'd like to work on as well. So those are really my main gripes, but the good news is that these things are all fixable. In all, I think this is a pretty great test, and it's a frame I'd normally be happy with, but in this case, I'm definitely going to do this again because it just isn't quite close enough for my liking. I give it a solid 7 out of 10. But to answer the main question here, did I get the job or did this missed attempt hurt me? Well, the producers felt mostly the same way I did. It was pretty close, but not quite it. Their feedback was almost identical as mine. They said, like, get the key light looking a little more defined and work on the moody background, but it was definitely in the right direction, and they were happy enough not to fire me, so that's good news. Honestly, I think if I hadn't done this test, like if I just shown up to the first location on day one and given them this frame, things might have been a bit tense because then there'd be no more time to adjust. That's the kind of situation where people get mad and it can go on to hurt your reputation, but because we were able to get out ahead of it and adjust so that we're now on the same page, in some ways I think it actually gave them more confidence in me. So yeah, it wasn't a 10 out of 10 and it was a lot of work that I didn't get paid for, but I'm really happy I did it. And if there's a lesson in here, it would be that if you're taking on something challenging and you really want to do a good job,
go the extra mile and try it out on your own. Ideally, you'd be getting paid for pre-pro days, but it's still worth it if the project is important to you. Not only is this kind of thing going to make you better at your job, it's going to make high-profile clients happier, and that's how you build a long-term career. I may or may not film the follow-up attempt. Let me know if you're into it, but I'm curious, what do you guys think? How far off was I on this one, and what would you have done differently? Let me know below. Now let's get back to location, say goodbye to Sean, and pack up all the gear.
Okay, so that was a super long day. Is kind of a look at how I would normally go about this. I don't know. What did you think? As from your point of view, did we get there or?
Yeah. I think it looks like it was pulled right out of the. You could easily cut in between it. It's really funny for me to see myself in such a nice like framing and with all the lights and stuff. But yeah, it looks like it matches it completely. It looks bang on.
Did you? What did you find? What did you find surprising about this process? Was it more or less what you expected? Did it take longer?
It took significantly longer than I thought it would, but it wasn't I mean, it was interesting to see. It was cool to see like how you're basically, I don't know if this is the right term for it, but layering light. Like you start with one and then you build off that one, then you added another one here, and then you like tweaked one based on what you did here. And it's cool to kind of see that process develop. And I understand now why it takes as long as it does, because you're like, as soon as you add one thing, the next thing needs to kind of adjust based on that thing, and there's like a lot of little things that you don't really like think about, but they all come together at the end to make the image.
And you never know, maybe you go through all that work and then I send it off and they don't like it, so all part of the process. Yeah. And yeah, thanks for coming out and helping us get a great deal on that gear. And yeah, sorry it was such a long day.
Oh, no problem at all. I had a blast. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. Check out Sean's tiny little 5 million person channel. I'm teaching him all sorts of stuff about how to grow YouTube. So yeah, head over to Forge Labs and check him out there.
Wonderful.